Amara Johnson was not just a black woman. At 42, she had not only broken through the barriers imposed by a society often hostile to black women, but she had also become a pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence. Founder and CEO of a revolutionary company, NextGen AI, Amara had built her empire from nothing. Her rise had not been easy. She came from a modest neighborhood in Chicago, where her parents, two hard workers, had raised her in an environment where dreams often seemed to be a rare commodity. But from a young age, Amara understood that to change her destiny, she had to work twice as hard as others. In the world of technology, dominated by white men from wealthy families, Amara had had to prove her worth at every step. She wasn't just an entrepreneur, she was a visionary, a strategist who, thanks to her keen intelligence and indomitable courage, had been able to navigate this unforgiving universe. His research in artificial intelligence had not only attracted the attention of the biggest tech companies, but it had also allowed his company to grow at an impressive speed. Today, NextGen AI had partnerships with the world's largest companies, and Amara had become a leading figure in discussions about the future of technology and innovation. She was regularly invited to prestigious conferences around the world, where she shared her ideas with global leaders in technology, but also with those in the education, finance, and health sectors. She had paved the way for other black women in tech, becoming a role model, an inspiration for those who were still in the shadows. Despite everything she had accomplished, Amara still had this strange feeling that a part of her still had to constantly defend herself. She knew that her presence, in these circles dominated by white men, was sometimes perceived as an affront. She wasn't just Amara, the brilliant entrepreneur, but also Amara, the black woman who some said had no place in this world. However, this look, as uncomfortable as it was, had never stopped her. On the contrary, he had strengthened his resolve. Today, however, she found herself in a completely different situation. This visit to the luxury car dealership had nothing to do with major world conferences or business meetings. It was not a professional transaction, but a very personal gesture, a symbol of everything she had accomplished, a tribute to her own success. For several months, Amara had been dreaming of this car, a rare model, a limited edition that combined clean lines, cutting-edge technology, and performance that matched her own journey. Each curve of this vehicle seemed to embody its own journey, that of a black woman who had faced adversity and emerged victorious. She had saved for months, made her investments grow, and after years of hard work, she was ready to reward herself. The idea of owning this car gave her a feeling of pride that she had not often felt, that of marking a milestone in her life, of affirming that she had arrived where she had always wanted to be. The dealership, located in an upscale part of town, seemed almost unreal. It was a temple dedicated to wealth and exclusivity. The cars were presented like works of art under carefully orchestrated lighting, and the polished marble floors gleamed like mirrors under the feet of customers who slowly strolled between the stalls. Amara felt almost out of place, but also legitimate. She had worked to be there. She deserved it. The wealth of this place, the cars that surrounded him, it all just seemed to be a material reflection of his own success. And yet, upon entering the space, a slight uneasiness had settled within her, almost imperceptible at first. This look, this feeling that his eyes were following his steps, that there was something more than simple attention, a careful examination. She felt it right away when she entered the dealership. It was as if the walls themselves had watched his presence with suspicion. This wasn't the first time Amara had felt this kind of stare. Often, even in the conference rooms where she was invited, some would subtly remind her, through their attitude or their words, that she was not supposed to be there. That, despite her successes, she was different. This feeling, this invisible gaze, was a burden she had learned to bear with resilience. As she walked towards her dream car, a saleswoman approached her. She was young, professional, but something in her smile didn't ring true. He was polite, but he lacked warmth. It wasn't the kind of smile you reserve for a valued customer, someone you hope will leave with a high-end vehicle. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Amara, with a smile on her face and a calm voice, replied without hesitation. "Yes, I would like to take a closer look at this car. I am interested in purchasing it." The saleswoman nodded, but her gaze froze for a moment before turning to another employee in the room. This gesture, barely perceptible, did not escape Amara. But she forced herself not to pay attention to it. After all, she was only there for a simple transaction. She thought the saleswoman would just walk her to the car and show her the features. But an unease grew in the air, a subtle but undeniable change. The atmosphere, already tense, transformed into something heavier, more palpable. Murmurs began to be heard among the customers. Amara didn't understand. She had never experienced this kind of welcome in places where she was usually respected for her status. Moments later, 2 uniformed police officers entered the compound, their arrival shattering the almost religious calm of the room. The crowd instantly froze. The customers' gazes turned towards them, curious but uncomfortable. The police paid no attention to the scene unfolding around them. They headed straight towards Amara, without a word of explanation. "Madam, please come with us," one of the police officers ordered sharply, without even looking at the saleswoman or the other customers. Amara's heart sank. "I'm here to buy this car," she explained calmly, still not understanding what was happening. "There seems to be a misunderstanding." But they didn't listen to him. Another police officer had come closer and, in a sudden and deliberate movement, grabbed his arm. The heat of the room suddenly seemed stifling. The crowd around watched the scene. Some murmured among themselves, others looked away. Amara suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable. Her successes, her status, everything she had accomplished no longer mattered. She was simply a black woman, and in this world, that was what mattered. The saleswoman, now in the background, observed the scene with an almost imperceptible expression of satisfaction. Her role in all this seemed played out, as if she had had a part in orchestrating this humiliation. Amara suddenly felt dehumanized, reduced to a suspect figure, a presence that had no place in this world of luxury and privilege. "But you have no right to stop me," Amara protested, her voice rising slightly, betraying the annoyance she was trying to mask. She was not a stranger in this world, and it revolted her that she was being treated like this. "I'm a customer. I come from a publicly traded company. You can't treat me like this. I'm Amara Johnson, the founder of NextGen AI. You know who I am, don't you?" The police officers exchanged furtive glances. Then one of them, in a sharper tone, replied, "We have received a complaint, ma'am. It seems that you are here for another reason." The policeman tried to make this explanation seem like it made sense, but his lack of empathy and humanity made the situation even more absurd in Amara's eyes. "A complaint," Amara repeated, now completely stunned by the situation. "From whom?" The injustice of this situation hit Amara with the brutality of a hammer. She couldn't understand how, in a society she had helped change, she could be arrested on false charges. Before she had time to ask any more questions, a third police officer came rushing in, and without further explanation, Amara was escorted out of the dealership, to the incredulous and embarrassed looks of the other customers. What struck her most was not simply being wrongly accused, but this feeling of regression, of returning to a status she had not known since her early years in the business world. She, the CEO, the Silicon Valley entrepreneur, had been reduced to a mere suspect, ignored and invisible in the face of the color of her skin. The dishonor she felt was not only linked to the shame of public questioning, but to the brutal reality of the society in which she lived. The car ride to the police station was in heavy silence. Amara's impassive face hid an inner storm. How had she gotten there? She had been confident in her accomplishments. She had worked tirelessly to overcome each obstacle, to escape these stereotypes. And yet, deep down, she knew that it was the color of her skin that made her a suspect in the eyes of some. Her success seemed to be a simple illusion, erased in an instant by the brutality of this world which, although it saw her as a business star, had never seen her as anything other than a black woman. Arriving at the station, after being briefly questioned, a uniformed official looked up at her file. When he read her name, his eyes widened in surprise. He was a man Amara had met at a conference on artificial intelligence. He quickly approached the table where she was sitting, and in shock, he spoke sharply to another police officer. "But, it's Amara Johnson, the founder of NextGen AI. She is one of the most respected entrepreneurs in the tech world. You can't treat her like that. What are you doing?" The man tried to correct the mistake, but it was already too late. Amara had been reduced to a spectacle, and despite the late explanations, public humiliation was already in place. The other police officers seemed indifferent to this revelation, simply irritated by the situation. But that wasn't the end. The next morning, newspapers and social media were abuzz. The story of Amara Johnson's arrest spread quickly, and what could have been an isolated incident turned into a full-blown scandal. Millions of people were now following his story, and public debate was heating up. It was no longer just the question of an abusive arrest, but that of a much larger societal problem: persistent racial discrimination, even in the highest economic and technological spheres. Voices were raised, supporting Amara in her fight against abuse of power and racial injustice. Others, however, sought to minimize the situation, to reduce the matter to an error of judgment, a simple misunderstanding. Social networks were divided, as is often the case, into a polarized debate. But Amara was more determined than ever not to let this humiliation be reduced to just an isolated incident. She knew that this experience would not be in vain, that her fight would become the fight of millions of others who did not have the same visibility, the same power. Civil rights groups took up his case. A lawyer specializing in racial discrimination, himself a former Silicon Valley colleague, willingly came forward to defend Amara. He knew that this cause went beyond simple compensation. It was a battle for recognition, so that black women like Amara could exist in this world without being systematically reduced to the color of their skin. During the trial, the prosecutor's attorney, in a solemn tone, made a statement that resonated deeply. "What happened here is not just an error of judgment. It is not a misunderstanding. It is a reflection on the way in which even black women who have reached the heights of their careers are constantly confronted with racial stereotypes. This trial is a warning. We must face this reality, or we will allow it to become more entrenched deeper." Amara, usually a private person, suddenly found herself in the spotlight, at the forefront of a battle for racial equality far bigger than she had ever imagined. However, she transformed pain and humiliation into strength, becoming a powerful voice against the oppressive system. In the end, the affair concluded with a public apology from the car dealership and the police officers involved. But that was not all. Amara also received a substantial financial settlement. What mattered was the profound transformation she was experiencing. She became, despite herself, one of the most emblematic symbols of the fight against racial discrimination in the business world. She was invited to speak at international conferences, using her platform to denounce the systemic injustices that continued to hinder the freedom and development of black women and men. What she thought would be a simple day of shopping became a major turning point in her life. She understood that, even at the height of success, the road to dignity was paved with constant struggles. And on this path, she forced herself to ignore the looks full of prejudice, transforming humiliations into strengths and opening the way to a future where future generations would no longer have to struggle to exist without compromise.